we are in part 3 of a series where we're talking about justice. We're calling it "And Justice for All." We stole that right out of the old Pledge of Allegiance, as you know. But we're talking about justice in terms of biblical justice. And the reason we say that, the reason I say biblical justice is because we're not just talking about, taking somebody to court and, serving justice and taking the offender and, doing something, punishing them. This really is, when it comes to Scripture, it's not a political issue. It's not an American ideal. This really is more about restorative justice than it is retributive justice. More often than not, when you run into this word, justice, in Scripture, or just the theme, the idea of justice, is talking about restorative justice, bringing justice to a situation, restoring wholeness. And so the idea in Scripture is that we have to gain wisdom in order to know justice. This is the way it gets talked about in Proverbs. We looked at that the first week. That we have to gain wisdom, exercise discernment in order to really be aware, to see what's going on around us. Because sometimes we just aren't aware. We just don't have our eyes open. But we have to gain a heart of wisdom to really know where need is, where we need to extend and restore justice. And then ultimately, it's the process of justice that brings about shalom. This is what we said the first week. It's the Hebrew word for peace, which really is an all-encompassing kind of wholeness. It is completeness in every area of our lives. The Hebrew idea of shalom is wholeness in not just your spiritual life, but financially and emotionally and physically and relationally and professionally. In every area of our lives, it's finding that peace, that shalom. And so when something's broken, there is an injustice. That justice needs to be done because justice is what brings about shalom. So that's how all of this is connected. But then last week we added this word mercy, and we said that without mercy, we won't be willing to actually go through the process of administering justice, of administering restorative justice. We have to be willing to extend mercy, because those sound, kind of like, a bit of a paradox to say, well, am I supposed to be, doing justice or extending mercy? When actually, in order to do justice and to bring about shalom, it requires some level of mercy. And the only way we're going to extend mercy is when we recognize the mercy that has been given to us by our Heavenly Father, to really see the magnitude of mercy when it comes to what God and through Jesus has done for us. And so today, that's where we've been the last few weeks. I highly recommend, if you haven't watched already, go back and catch up on the first couple of weeks, because it'll do a lot better job than what I just was able to do there. Today, though, I want to address that nagging thought that kind of continues to run through at least my mind when I think about this, but probably yours as well. When you think about the idea of justice and being a Christian and having the responsibility to seek justice and to do justice in different parts of the world and different areas of our lives and the lives of other people around us, to do that, there's just this thought that continues to keep us from fully engaging, from really getting involved, from really going the extra mile and participating and bringing justice. There's, and I think it comes in the realm of, it looks a little bit different for all of us, but for the most part, we recognize, what I recognize, I'm sure you do as well, that ultimately, when doing justice, it will eventually cost you something. And you know how this goes. We all know this. And we're talking more, it's a serious cost in many cases, but more than just like a, McDonald's cheeseburger that you pass through the window, on your way to get on the interstate because you got stopped and there he was. And so you had it and you had food. And so you gave it out the window. Okay. So there's, a little bit of cost there, but that's not what we're talking about. I'm talking about the kind of cost that really hinders you, that keeps you from really jumping in, from really fully engaging. Because there's some cost involved. And it's scary. It's going to cost you some time. It's going to cost you some energy and some, for you to really engage and to participate, it's going to cost you in physically and spiritually and emotionally, and probably going to, there's going to be some money involved. But some time away from your family. There is cost involved when doing justice. And so this idea of being willing to step into it is very difficult. Think about it this way. When I watch people, when I hear stories and, everybody kind of has a different reason for, getting passionate about something and actually jumping in and being involved in spite of the cost, and other people have their reasons for not doing it. But at the end of the day, just consider, your version of this. Maybe it's somebody that has just lost a job. Maybe it's a couple who is experiencing, a divorce or just recently, or maybe somebody has gotten diagnosed with something and they only have a few months to live. And you think, well, I have a choice to make. I could just say, kind of to do the casual, hey, I'm so sorry, we will be praying for you, which is great. And we mean that, but not a lot of cost there. But we could make the decision, I'm going to go all in with this. I see an injustice, I see a need, and I want to meet that. I want to be there for that, and so I'm going to go all in. But to do so means there will be cost. It's going to cost you your time, and it's going to cost you some energy, and it's going to cost you emotionally, because you're going to hurt with them. You're going to feel what they're feeling. That's what it means to really engage in that way. And so maybe we're willing to do that when it comes to a situation, and it's some people we know. But what about this? What about people you don't know? What do we do then? What about people that we don't like? What about people who we don't agree with? People, or even a group of people that we don't agree with their lifestyle, we don't agree with their political persuasion, we don't agree with their thought process, we don't agree with anything about them, and we're thinking, there's a situation there, but they've gotten themselves into their own trouble. You don't agree with them, but you've become aware that there's some hurt there, that they've been wrongfully hurt. There's an injustice being done, and you've become aware of it. And so, but kind of the back of your mind is thinking, but they did this to themselves. They dug themselves their own hole. You could do that, or you could choose to jump in, to go all in, to be willing to extend mercy and administer justice, but to do so will cost you. It will cost you some time and energy, and probably when it's, potentially this group of people or this person or this family or this couple, whatever it is, it may even cost you your reputation. It may even cost you your job, who knows? Because people talk. People love to talk, don't they? It may cost a little embarrassment. It may cause some discomfort on your part. It's just like, I'm not real comfortable with this. People say things and people make assumptions, and they, associate you with certain things because of where you were spending your time and who, where you were meeting needs. And, now they're trolling you on social media, whatever it looks like. There's cost involved. Which is why we said this, that when it comes to justice, eventually it will cost you something. So eventually it will require a willful generosity. And that's really what I want to talk about today. It's this willful generosity. Generosity in the sense of not being obligated to do something. Generosity not being forced or coerced to do something. I feel like I have to. And that's not generosity. We're talking about in any realm, in any area, and in the way you serve, in your time, anything that costs you, anything that you're willing to give up or sacrifice requires some level of generosity. And willful generosity means there's a really heartfelt willingness, like a desire, like I want to do this. Even in spite of the cost, even though you count the cost, you recognize that there's some cost involved, but you don't care because you are willfully generous. You're willing to jump in and go the distance, and it's a decision that you make. It's a choice that you're making. Your arm hasn't been twisted. But as I watch and, over the years in ministry and I hear people's stories and I hear people talk, here's the thing. When it comes to Christians, I think we do, for the most part, a pretty good job of this. When it gets down to it, especially with people or, a situation where you've been involved, you go on a mission trip and all of a sudden you've got this newfound, kind of heartfelt desire to help people who you never thought about before in your life. We've experienced things like this. And Christians, I think, do a pretty good job when it comes to most areas of our lives, when it comes to jumping in and, rolling up our sleeves and getting dirty and serving people and even taking time off of work and, being willing to make some sacrifices and to give of ourselves. But there's this line, and this is really where I want us to go today, because I think we do a pretty good job. When we get passionate about something, we do a pretty good job. And most of us, we're talking, the vast majority of us, there's kind of a line out there, an unspoken. And it looks like this. You see, willful generosity quickly becomes dreaded obligation when it involves our money. Isn't that true? And this is all, at some point, to some degree, we've all experienced this. There's just something no. I will give you my time. I will take time off of work. I'll give up some of my hours. I will go there. I will build. I will fix. I'll even, maybe even give some of our extra clothes and extra toys, and I'll take them to Walmart and buy them some things. I'll do Christmas for them. But, just like writing a check or, I can't obligate myself that way. I'm not much better off than them. That's just where I draw the line. That's a little too far. We've all experienced that. Let me just say, because this is what we're going to flesh out today, because I think this is really the area of hang-up for us where we're the most close-fisted, is with our stuff, with our possessions, and there's reason for that, and we're going to talk about it today. But first, I want to make a couple of promises, because I know we hear the word money in a sermon, and immediately that red flag goes off. It's like, got to go bathroom. Got to get out of here. Preacher about to talk about money. There must be a capital campaign coming. But let me just make some promises. Okay? Because I don't want this to be the hang-up. It is not my intention today to make you feel guilty. Guilt is useless. It's a terrible motivator, and we all know how to live with guilt. So I'm not trying to I promise that's not my goal. Number two, I'm not going to tell you what to do with your money. It's not my job. And I will not ask you to give a dime to our church. Okay? So, that kind of should relieve most of the anxiety as far as talking about money in church, because that's not my goal today. There's no, sneak, kind of around, I'm not sneaking. There's no end around here. I'm not trying to get you to do something you don't want to do. And this is nothing about me. This isn't about the church, okay? So just know that. Today, in order to talk about this, I want to look at a passage in 2 Corinthians chapter 8. I actually shared this a couple of years ago, kind of along these lines. But here Paul is writing to Christians in a place called Corinth. And there's some context as to what's going on behind the scenes, sort of the background that we need to understand in order to read and understand what he's actually trying to say here when he's writing to them. So he's writing this letter to people in Corinth, but it always helps me to see a map and to see kind of where things are. And again, this is just me, so just bear with me. This is Greece, and even modern day Greece looks a lot like this. Corinth is right here. So the people who Paul is writing to, where we're going to look today, he's writing to a group of Christians here where he planted a church. And notice that it is right on this major trade route. Okay, and so this was a very affluent city, probably very populous, a large city, lots of people, lots of diversity, lots of people in and out, which also meant people from all over the world were traveling through here because it was a lot shorter route to go through here than it was to go all the way around. And so people, lots of ideas, lots of religions, all kinds of thoughts, okay? So there was room for Christianity, so to speak. But up in the northern part of Greece, Macedonia, kind of this large area, think of it almost like a district or a province or a county, so to speak. This is where you find places like Thessalonica and Philippi, other places you're probably familiar with. Well, these are the people Paul is actually talking about, the Macedonian Christians, which is how he refers to them, when he's talking to the people in Corinth. So that's kind of the background. What you also have to know is that back in Jerusalem, where everything got started, so, like over here, go across east, across the Mediterranean Sea, get to Jerusalem, where everything started, and there is great persecution, as you've probably heard before, in that first century. A lot going on, and they are being shunned and outcast, and there's socioeconomic tension, to say the least, but they're being persecuted. It's very difficult to actually call yourself a Christian and have a job. So they had become very impoverished. There was extreme poverty among Jewish Christians in Jerusalem. So Paul and other leaders had gotten word of this and began going around to all the churches around the Mediterranean rim, places that they had planted these churches. Titus and Apollos and some of these different guys were going, and they were encouraging these Christians to make some donations. They were going to receive this collection. And so they were letting them know it. And then, of course, there was no sending an email and doing things quickly. So it was this long process of letting everybody know and then giving them time to collect funds. And then they would come back and receive it and go relieve some of the injustices happening in Jerusalem. Okay? So that's the backdrop. And so this is where we pick up chapter 8, verse 1. Paul says, "And now, brothers and sisters, people in Corinth, Christians, we want you to know about the grace that God has given the Macedonian churches." So he's saying, look, let me just start. I want to give you a quick story, a picture of what things look like for Christians just north of you. Because I want this to encourage you. I want this to be your motivation. Okay? I'm not trying to make you feel guilty. I'm not going to command you to do anything. I just want you to see what's happening there. Because God has extended some level of grace to these Macedonian churches. Now listen to what he describes. Based on that context we just got, listen. In the midst of a very severe trial, their overflowing joy, on the one hand, and their extreme poverty, on the other hand, welled up in rich generosity. We'll get back to that in just a second. Basically, Paul's saying, look, they're going through a really difficult time as well. Extreme poverty is what the Macedonian Christians are going through as well, not just those in Jerusalem. Yet they have this unbelievable overflowing joy within them in spite of their situation, and it caused them to be generous. That's weird. I mean, think about that. When was the last time you said, oh man, 2020 has been terrible. Lost my job. We're upside down in all kinds of payments. Think we're going to lose our house. We may have to file bankruptcy. We literally have nothing, no retirement. We've emptied our bank accounts. We've got nothing. Man, we have so much joy and we can't wait to be so generous. Has that ever, what scenario can you think of where that has been the equation? And yet Paul's describing that's the situation for the majority of the Macedonian churches. Extreme poverty, but they've got this unbelievable, overwhelming joy that has led them to be really generous. Why? Well, because they were materially poor, but spiritually rich. They didn't have much to give, but they were willing to give anyway. For I testify, I'm telling you, guys, you got to listen to this. I've got something to say. I went there, I visited them, and I can testify to this, that they gave as much as they were able, and even beyond their ability. Now, here's what's interesting. He's talking to a group of Christians in a fairly affluent city, and so the idea that they could have cut a pretty big fat check was very much a reality there in Corinth. But for the people in the Macedonian churches, it was not the same. So he wasn't trying to suggest that we're comparing apples to apples here. He wasn't saying they wrote some incredibly large checks. They gave lots and lots of dollar signs and zeros and decimal places. Like, it was unbelievable. So much money came in. No. He's saying they just gave as they were able and even beyond their ability. What was their ability? Not much. They were impoverished. But they gave what they were able and even more than. In other words, it's not about it. This is where it is about willful generosity, not about potential large sum donations. That's what Paul is stressing. This is about willful generosity, not about writing big checks, okay? This is about just a willingness I'm just telling you, it's unbelievable what we've watched. Entirely on their own. This was the situation. We didn't do this. I didn't command them. I didn't tell them they had to do this. I didn't twist their arm. I didn't, make any kind of promises. Entirely on their own, they pleaded. How did they plead? Urgently pleaded. Like, now, Paul. They pleaded with us for the privilege of sharing in this service to the Lord's people. Who were the Lord's people? He's referring to the people in Jerusalem who had great need. And the people in the Macedonian churches were saying, Paul, I know we don't have much. And Paul's thinking, you certainly don't. Like, y'all are definitely, you could definitely opt out. Like, I feel really bad even being here. I didn't realize the situation was what it is, but you could opt out. Would you just be praying for us? I just feel like Paul was probably, but entirely on their own, they said, no, Paul, don't take away our potential to receive God's grace and blessing by not giving us a chance to take part in this privilege of sharing. We want to give what we can. I know it's not much, but we just want to give what we can. That's what Paul's wanting the Corinthians to see. It's not about how much. Probably could, put it all in one little basket. It was so little. But they gave what they could. And they exceeded our expectations. We had no expectations. We knew they didn't have much. They gave, and here was how they exceeded their expectations. Watch this. He didn't say they wrote really big checks. It was unbelievable. He said, they gave themselves, first of all, to the Lord, and then by the will of God also to us. In other words, they were open-handed in their relationship with their Heavenly Father. They trusted. To give yourself first to the Lord is to say, God, I want to relinquish control in every area of my life, and I trust you with it. I just give it to you, including my wallet and my bank account and my 401k and my job. I just give it to you. And because they did that first, in other words, this wasn't about prioritizing God as much as it was about prioritizing giving to God. That's what they were doing. It's like they gave all of themselves first to the Lord and then also to Paul and the other leaders. And so Paul then begins to turn around and encourage the Corinthians based on what he's just shared with them about the Christians in Macedonia. He says, since you excel in everything, he's talking to the Corinthians, since you guys got this down, y'all are good church people. You're excel in faith and in speech and in knowledge and complete earnestness and in the love we have kindled in you. You go to church and you go to morning church, Sunday school, and night church, and Wednesday night discipleship training. And you take your kids, all of your kids, and they all love Jesus, praise God. You go to Wednesday night supper, and you don't even just go and eat all the food. You actually take some, a little green bean casserole. Like, you're there, and it's great, and you just are great. You're just such good church people. But I want to make sure that you also excel in this grace of giving. Grace of giving is actually just one Greek word, charis, which most of the time is just translated grace. But in this context, knowing that Paul is talking specifically about their generosity in terms of giving, financial giving, this is how we interpret. In most modern translations, you'll see this grace of giving or this gracious act. In other words, there's something happening, and I want you to excel in this. In other words, I want you to participate in this as well. Well, how do we do that? Well, I'm not commanding you. I'm not forcing you to. I'm not telling you it's like a rule, okay? I don't want you to feel guilty. That's not what this is about. I'm not commanding you. I just want to test the sincerity of your love by comparing it with the earnestness of others. In other words, I want you to see the example of what's happening in Macedonia to be an inspiration for you. But not just their example, but Christ's example. So he says, for you know the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, that though he was rich, yet for your sake he became poor, so that you through his poverty might become rich. Rich financially? Rich materially? No, we know better than that. Rich in spirit, like rich in eternal ways that we can't even understand yet, ways that we can't describe. Christ has done that for you, and kind of like understanding his mercy for us, we also understand his gracious gift. Grace is what? How do you define grace? Unmerited favor. Unearned gift. That's grace. It's unearned and it's a gift. That's what grace is. And so since Christ has given us this unmerited favor, this unearned gift that has made us rich, we should be willing to do likewise. And here is my judgment about what is best for you. So he says, like, based on all of this example that I'm giving you about what's happening and the grace God is giving to the Macedonian Christians, and also just what Jesus has done for you, let me just tell you what, in my judgment, based on all of this, is what I think is best for you, not what is commanded of you. This is actually, and it's not just what I think is best for the Jerusalem church. This is what I think is best for you. Isn't that interesting? It's not about, I mean, have you heard this before? It's not about what God can get from you. It's what God wants to do for you. That ultimately, that's what giving really looks like when it comes to our material possessions. God doesn't need our stuff. He doesn't need your check. He can accomplish his work and fulfill his will however he likes. But it's really about you, and Paul understands that. What's best for you in this matter being this collection that they're taking up. And he reminds them, last year, don't you remember last year? You were the first not only to give, you kind of gave a little seed offering, but also to have the desire to do so. Because it took that long. It was like a year ago, and remember I came and I talked to you about this great need that was happening in Jerusalem and how impoverished they were, and you were excited about it, and you were passionate about it, and you felt like, hey, we can do something about that. But it doesn't look like I've just kind of gotten wind that you're not really prepared for the collection, because it's kind of like out of sight, out of mind. You've lost focus. It's not a pressing need. It's so distant. It's so out there. They're way over there, and you've just kind of forgotten. So my encouragement for you, what's best for you, is to remember this and then finish the work. Finish the work. Why? So that your eager willingness to do it may be matched by your completion of it. Remember how willing you were? Well, great. Now the best thing for you is to actually complete the work. Follow through. You made a commitment, now follow through. But according to your means. In other words, I'm not trying to, again, I'm just stressing again, this is not about comparing what you're giving to what the Christians were able to give in Macedonia. I'm not suggesting there's a certain amount. I'm not suggesting there's even a percentage. I'm just saying we're not talking about your tithe. We're not talking about what you give on a weekly or monthly basis to your church or to your synagogue. I am talking about giving above and beyond. Well, how? According to your means. Maybe out of your surplus, but also maybe out of your own need. Again, this is about willful generosity and a willingness to count the cost. To recognize there are costs involved. It'll be pricey. It'll hurt a little bit. My feelings and my emotions are on the line as well, but I'm willing to do that because I want to participate in this gracious act of giving. You see, it's not about the amount, it's not a dollar amount. Instead, if the willingness is there, the gift is acceptable. Some of you need to hear that today. If there is a true desire in your heart, a heartfelt desire, I want to participate, I want to be a part of this, I want to give what I can, and as long as there is a willingness there, then whatever the gift is acceptable. Not I'll kind of let that dollar go. That's great, but it's never been about the dollar or, a certain amount. Instead, it's just a willingness to say, God, I trust you. Whatever you want to do with this. I want to even give till it hurts in some cases. And sometimes you've experienced that. Sometimes like you hear something and it doesn't really move you. And so, you don't necessarily participate. Other times it's like, oh, your heart breaks and you feel like you have to be involved and you end up doing something crazy, like something you never expected. You even exceed your own expectations. Like, I can't believe I did that. I gave up our Christmas in order to see that they could have Christmas. Those are the kind of things that people end up doing. It's crazy. But why do we do it? Well, because at some point along the way, there was a willful release, a willful generosity, a letting go and trusting God with the rest. And the gift is acceptable according to what one has, not according to what one does not have. Our desire is not that others might be relieved, you see, while you are hard pressed, but that there might be equality. He talks about this idea of equality, but hang tight, because that's such a buzzword these days, but listen to what he's talking about. At the present time, your plenty, this is what he means by equality. At the present time, your plenty will supply what they need, so that in turn, their plenty will supply what you need in the future. The goal, he says it again, is equality. Now, by equality, he's not referring to some kind of weird, mystical communism, communistic society of, leveling the playing field and let's just pool all the money into a pot and split it up and, eliminating classes and bringing everybody together. Like, that's not what Paul is saying. Paul is envisioning a Christian society, a Christian culture where people are willing to freely give and receive, to share everything in common. Acts 2. That idea. In other words, just to think in terms of, because notice there was still the poor in Acts. So it wasn't like they just kind of like dispensed of all their goods. No, they just said when there was a time of need for somebody else and you had surplus, that surplus, you could just assume that God had given you that to meet that need. And then when the tables turn, their surplus is there to meet your need or somebody else's. And so this is how, he said, when we are willing to do that, there is equality. Not equality in dollar amounts or social status or socioeconomic status. Equality in terms of our willingness to be generous. To freely give and receive. That is equality. You see, the goal is equality as it is written, and this is where he wraps it up. The one who gathered much, he's quoting Exodus chapter 16. The one who gathered much did not have too much. And the one who gathered little did not have too little. He's reminding them of what happened when God took care of the Israelites in the wilderness for 40 years. That he gave them manna from heaven. He provided food for them, but if you remember how the story goes, you remember that God never gave them enough for more than one day, except right before the Sabbath. And he would give them enough for how much? 2 days. And that was it. And if they tried to, store it up or sock it away, it would rot before the next day. And so, even if you didn't go, the idea was God was providing just enough. So even if you didn't go out that day and you didn't collect enough, somebody else could have collected more and their surplus would then provide for your need and vice versa. When the tables are turned. In other words, there was always just enough because of God's provision in their lives for them to have what they needed for that particular moment in time for every person. And that is in the economy of God, that's God's model. He gives us what we need. He gives us not, and some of us have more than what we need. That's not necessarily there to live on more than we need. It's provided for those who perhaps don't have need, because then when the tables are turned, this is the equality that Paul is imagining, that he's envisioning, that he's calling people to. So let me just ask you this. Why do we struggle with this? Like, why? Because I think most of us will look at that and go, praise the Lord. Yes, that's what I want. Like, that sounds great. It's a little scary, but I think on the surface, in theory, that sounds good. So why do we struggle with this? And I think there's probably a lot of different reasons you could pinpoint, but I think C.S. Lewis, in his book, Mere Christianity, I think he just hits it right on the head. Listen to what he says. For many of us, the great obstacle to charity lies not in our luxurious living or desire for more money, but in our fear of insecurity. I think he nails it. I think for most of us, for those of us who are Christ followers, who know that giving is good for us and, it provides and meets other needs. But I think what really hinders us, what keeps us from just going all out and just saying, God, this is yours, and I'm giving you first, I'm giving myself first to you. Like, what keeps us from that is a fear of insecurity. Because why? What does that mean? It means we find security in the things that we can cling to. And so what do? We cling to it. I mean, it's so easy to do, isn't it? It's so hard to be open-handed when it comes to our stuff, when it comes to our possessions, because we think, well, what if? Well, I got to plan for the future. Well, I'm supposed to be a good steward. I'm supposed to be wise with my resources. God has blessed me with it. Therefore, I assume it's for my consumption. And we live our lives this way, and we really never lean into what God has for us. And if we're waiting, here's the thing. If we're waiting, because maybe, I'm sure we've all got our reasons, our excuses, and I know I do. I mean, I can think of my own, but here's the thing. If you're waiting for the day when everything, kind of pans out for you, or when that job works out, or when that salary raise comes through, or when you're able to get that promotion, or if you're waiting until, past 2020, praise Jesus, when we, if we could get the stock market right, well, I'm just waiting on, the economy to kind of level back out. Well, I'm waiting on the housing market to go back up. Well, I'm waiting on gas prices to go down. Well, I'm waiting on, if that's what you're waiting on, here's the thing. When that happens, I can promise you this, if you didn't practice generosity during times of need, you won't be generous then. Why? Because you weren't generous. If you weren't generous now, during this season when you had little, it doesn't just magically become generosity later, because we always think we need more. There's always a reason to feel insecure. So here's kind of bottom line of what I feel like Paul is communicating. No matter how much or how little you have, God will always provide what is needed for those who trust him. It's not about an amount. It's not about a dollar sign. It's not about how many zeros you can write in the check. Like, that's not it. It doesn't matter how much or how little you have, which is why the Macedonian churches were able to have joy and were able to be extremely generous, the way Paul describes it. They didn't write an extremely large check. They just were generous. Why? Because they gave what they had, even though they had little. And because God, they just recognized, because they gave themselves first to the Lord, they recognized that God will always provide what is needed, what is necessary for those who trust him. It begins with a matter of trust. It's a level of trust. So here's what I think, based on what Paul is communicating. Here's just a couple of things to remember. You may want to write these down. It's just kind of a simplification of all of this. And then I want to talk about a way that we can begin to put this into action. Willful generosity begins first by giving yourself first to the Lord. This is where it starts. Give yourself first to the Lord. In other words, find ways to begin to open your hands up. And we're talking every area of your life. To begin to prioritize not just your relationship with God, but your giving to God. In other words, make him first. Make that the first check you write, not the last. Make that, I'm going to give even in my time of need, not just when I've got some extra. Like, consider that. And I'm not, again, this isn't about, and so write your check to Ridge Church. The number is da-da-da. Like, I'm not, give somewhere else if you're not comfortable here. But begin giving. Somewhere where you're passionate, where you trust, what's being done and their mission and their vision and, the quality of their work. When you know, like, I am passionate about this. I want to be a part of this. Begin giving, not just in your time or in your energy, but even out of your wallet. Why? Because that's when you know you've begun to really trust? It requires a new level of trust to be able to do that. And ask yourself this question if you're not real sure. Am I really trusting God with every area of my life, including my money? If you've ever wondered, well, why is this so hard for me? Why is it so hard to write this check? Why is it so hard for me to be generous? Ask yourself this question. Well, am I really trusting God in every area of my life? Especially when it comes to my finances. Then, number 2, practice giving. I see these are so good. Like I'm so smart. Like practice. In other words, you got to start somewhere. If you're waiting until everything kind of works out for you, you probably will never start. So just start right where you are with what you have according to your means. And willfully, because willfully giving is the kind of gift that is acceptable. It's not an amount. I'm a firm believer in practicing this kind of giving, because as you put it into practice, the more you learn you can do without and that you actually want to give in the future. That's what I find for people. People that never give it a try, never really experience, never really kind of push the envelope a little bit or put stuff in the envelope and seal it. People that never are willing to do that never experience the real fruit of God's grace in their life. Like those Macedonian Christians that brought joy, that ultimately welled up in rich generosity, the way Paul said it. It's crazy. So here's the question to ask yourself. Am I aware of a need that I can give to? Is there something that I'm passionate about? Is there something that's bothered me? Is there an injustice in the world or in somebody's life or in a couple or a family or within a group of people or a section of our culture? Is there something that you are aware of, a need that you can begin to give to, and then begin to do that? Put it into practice. Last thing. Make a commitment, follow through. Make a commitment and then follow through. And so the question here would be, have I committed to meeting a specific need, and am I willing to see it through? Am I willing to see it through? In other words, the way you make a commitment is by either writing it down or writing it down and telling somebody. You got to bring somebody into the loop here. Like there's some level of accountability. Like Paul knew that the Christians in Corinth had made this level of commitment, and so he wanted to encourage them. Look, don't you remember last year you were so excited about this? What happened? Why haven't you thought about it again? You never started. You never started putting things back, and now, I'm about to come back and visit you, and you're not prepared. Make a commitment, and then keep it on your radar. Write it down. Let somebody know. And here's one way to do this. Participate in something with other people. Give together. There's a lot of motivation when we're kind of doing sort of the same thing. It's why churches, are even remotely successful in, pulling this off, because people are sitting and experiencing the same thing, and so they're willing to give to that. And so I think a lot of that is just because we're together. There's a similar shared experience. But even in terms of above and beyond giving, 2 years ago, when I actually taught through this passage, I introduced you to a place called Panusuela in Dominican Republic. It's just a community just outside of Santiago, sort of in the middle of the country, sort of the north central area. And there's an extremely my wife Rebecca and I visited there almost 3 years ago now, and we were introduced to Pastor Stanley and the church that is serving this community in Panusuela, and I'm telling you, we witnessed extreme poverty. Extreme poverty. Literally little boys naked bathing in a bucket in the middle of the street, and kids running around literally without parents. And, it was overwhelming. So we made the decision as a church to partner through an organization called Children's Cup, with this community in Pontezuela. And we said, and this is what I shared a couple of years ago, is that we're gonna make the long-term commitment. We're gonna make a commitment, and guess what? We're following through on that commitment. And so we're connected in terms of sponsoring children in that community, but also helping fund different projects within that community, providing for their school and some uniforms and some, library and books. And, matter of fact, we got a team going. We've been 5 times. I've sent 5 different teams for several days at a time over the last couple of years. And we've got a group going next week, going back. And they're taking, how many suitcases are we going to take? 14 people? 14 suitcases, not full of their clothing, and although probably half of them are your clothing. No, I'm just kidding. 14 extra suitcases full of supplies and presents and gifts for the children in that community, but also the people who serve in the church there and who work in that community. And so it's so much fun because it's not like we're, kind of piecemealed and, well, you have a kid that you're sponsoring in, another country, and then we're over here, and then we're doing this over here. Instead, we've just taken what resource, because we don't have a whole lot, like we don't have a building yet, but we've taken what we do have, and we've decided to invest it in a very specific place and count the cost. And so every year we have this annual Christmas offering, which we're going to be taking up again this year, December the 13th. And so I just want to let you know about that, because what's fun about our Christmas offering is we don't keep any of it for ourselves. It's not for projects for us. It's always for projects with partners in our local community, with ARC, our national partner in planting churches around our country, and then internationally, specifically right now, with the DR. With the church in the DR and Pastor Stanley. Pastor Stanley, if you remember, he came actually this month last year and came and visited with us, and he spoke to us and got to share some things with us. It's been such a fun relationship because not only are we partnered with the church as a church, but each of you, so many of you, we sponsored before today, we had 58 kids that people in this church were sponsoring of kids in that same community. So then people who travel down there get to visit their kids, and we're all together. And so it's just like this, we're in this together thing. And I think that helps, doesn't it? Because it kind of keeps it on the radar, keeps it on the front burner, because we're all in it together. We're doing this thing together. We're committed together. There's this sense of equality, because it's not like, oh, well, we've got something to offer. We're that, the big, but no, it's like we don't have much. Matter of fact, from their church, they take mission trips to other places as well, just like we go there. So, it's, we're each serving based on what we have and according to our means. So today, there's a table back there. And I think we've only got one left, right? We only had 6. We only had 7. Oh, we're so wrong. We only had 7 kids extra. So we had 58 already sponsored and taken care of. But the first service knocked it out of the park, and so they already stole 6 of them. But those are just ones that we have cards for. There are lots of other kids in that community, and so there will be more. And so if you're interested, here's what I would suggest. This is such a simple way to begin practicing giving, to just practice, because I think it's $39 a month, $39 a month. And all the information as far as what it does and what it takes care of and all of that, this isn't about it. None of this comes to us, I promise. So this is all about the kids in that community that we're partnered with. And this is what partnership looks like. It's giving you an opportunity to participate in what we're doing. And that's a super simple way. But outside of sponsorships, we're also going to be collecting, once again, in our Christmas offering, a large donation to be able to help meet a specific need there in the community. Over the next few weeks, there's going to be some other things we do here locally and nationally, but also in Pontezuela. We're going to be rolling those out over the next few weeks and letting you know specifically what those projects are. But I just wanted to kind of get the gears rolling and be planning for that. Make a commitment and then follow through. Bring it to completion. participate with us, because we're going to do that. We're going to see it through. And the way that we see it through is not just by writing checks out of our budget, but by inviting you to participate with us. Does that make sense? And so, again, it's not about Ridge Church. I'm not telling you what you should give or how much you should give. I'm just providing an opportunity. If you've got something else that you are interested in and that you're passionate about, give there. But if you're not sure, perfect opportunity right here for us to be on the same page and to really love together. God has been generous to this church. He's been generous to me, generous to you. And he's called us to be generous, willfully generous to those around us who have experienced some form of injustice and brokenness. And we can provide that peace.